Without wasting any time, let's read your Murder Drones hot takes. Eric M says, I am not a fan of how death was handled in the show. The camping episode is a great example of what I mean. I agree, and episode 4 is still my least favorite of the show. Sin is interesting and would have worked as a great character if the show had more episodes. I don't like Sin that much, but having more time dedicated to her character would have definitely fleshed her out more. Jay should have stayed dead. I agree. After episode 2, there wasn't a reason for this character to come back. They showed her bond with Tessa in episode 5, but that led to nothing. Jay didn't care that Sin killed Tessa, and it was such a missed opportunity. M. Ladybug says, it's not very good story-wise. I have to turn my brain off in order to enjoy the show. Otherwise I noticed constant plot holes and other things about it that make no sense. Also, as much as I love The Living Tombstone, and I love The Living Tombstone, I'm not joking, their collab with the Murder Drones wasn't very good, but that's just me. The song was just generic. I think the song was okay. It wasn't that great, but it was enjoyable enough, at least for me. I do like the rap part sung by Sin. CD says, I find the plot very confusing. This isn't exactly a hot take. Pretty much everyone finds the plot confusing. I still agree with this statement though. I think Murder Drones is the only show I've ever watched that literally gave me a migraine after I finished it. After episode 8, I had to take some paracetamol. Not even the end of Evangelion took such a toll on me. Weeb Guru says, hot take, Murder Drones would have benefited if they kept the idea humans versus robots up until Sin is revealed. This is something I said in my Murder Drones review. The humans versus drones plot just sounds more interesting to me, and it's also the reason why the pilot is still my favorite episode of the show. Helonia Punk says, nothing weirder than Anne's somewhat sister's soul inside his girlfriend. Must be so awkward. I never thought about it like that, but it is weird. It Me Sammy Lawrence says, the show needed more episodes because after like episode 2, the episodes felt like we are rushing plot to get to the end. Even then I hear the last episode was in writing hell. This isn't a problem unique to Murder Drones. I think the show would have benefited tremendously from more episodes that flesh out the world and characters. I repeat that the show feels claustrophobic due to how quickly things happen. 2. I wish Doll was used more. I don't remember what she even adds to the show outside of fights, and I forget she died in the last episode. Doll is in that weird limbo where I understand what the author wanted to do with her, but at the same time, I didn't like the execution. Having a character be the dark reflection of what could become of the protagonist is cool, but we just don't get enough time to know Doll, or even feel sorry for her situation. We know what happened to her parents, and we know she's struggling with the solver, but we don't actually see her face these problems. And I never liked how the show forgets that she killed innocent drones in the promenade. Leader Loser says, the pacing sucks and I shouldn't have to watch theory channels to understand what's going on. That's terrible writing 101. It pains me a bit to say it, but I agree. The pacing is this show's biggest problem, because all the other flaws are directly tied to it. Moving things too quickly takes away the chance for the characters to bond more. I respect Murder Drones because that's how the creator wanted to show it to a general audience, but the fans can't expect everyone else to just accept that. The majority of Murder Drones fans are perfectly okay with theory channels and pausing the video to see a few pixels that confirm their theories. I'm assuming because it passes the time. But everyone else wants an actual show. Not everyone wants to do a deep dive on the internet to understand something they watched. I think it all comes down to what type of media you like to consume. Some people like more direct storytelling. Others enjoy cryptic stories that require the viewer to actively pay attention to everything. I do agree with one point though. Expecting the viewer to pause every frame of the episode to find plot points is terrible writing. One example of a show that pulled off something similar is Gravity Falls. When you rewatch the episodes, you will notice countless details in the background that reference other plot points in the show. But it's not like you won't understand the show if you didn't notice Blendin appearing in the background before his first official appearance in the show. To me, Murder Drones feels like if I were to make a show for my OCs, and I only show the important action-jammed parts that I find the most fun to mess around with, and I skip literally everything in between that can help you be attached to my OCs. Yes, you're fascinated by the battles going on, but do you actually know what's going on? Only I as the creator actually know. This can be perfectly applied to both Murder Drones and Hazbin Hotel. I'm not saying it's impossible to enjoy them, after all I had my fun with Murder Drones, but they do feel like products whose main audience is their author. I love shows that can spring up theories, but it has to be an actual show first that you can consume. For example, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. This show has episodes that are easy to comprehend. The entire premise isn't confusing, and you still get attached to the characters. You understand the plot and therefore get invested. And yet there's still a ton of theories that expand the show. It doesn't explain it if that makes sense. The David theory with Yellow Guy expands on the show, but you don't actually need to know that theory to enjoy the show. This is the first time in years that I have seen Don't Hug Me I'm Scared mentioned. I think the example used by Leader Loser is surprisingly fitting. I still remember the first time I watched Don't Hug Me I'm Scared. By the end, I kind of understood that the characters were stuck in this sort of children's cartoon and Roy was the villain. The rewatches solidified my understanding of what was going on. Looking for theories came after. With Murder Drones, the complete Murder Drones story explained video is mandatory as soon as you finish episode 8. If you tell me that you watched Murder Drones once and understood it 100% without needing to read the wiki, I straight up won't believe you. Murder Drones isn't a bad show at all, and that's what frustrates me. The creator has an amazing story and yet won't show it unless you're an internet detective. I think what frustrates me the most is that it had all the elements to be an amazing sci-fi story, but threw it all away because of the limited number of episodes. Melody Starlight says, "The fact that the whole Uzi's father leaving her to die was treated like a horrible thing, and it is, don't get me wrong, but in later episodes Uzi kills her classmates with no consequence. I think this happened because Murder Drones is extremely Uzi-centric. We are supposed to perceive certain things as bad only when they happen to her." Selena Plays says, "I think the humor can overshadow the show sometimes. Don't get me wrong, humor is needed regardless of the genre, but sometimes I feel like it overuses it for the sake of an unfunny joke. The problem with Murder Drone's humor is that sometimes, shockingly, it works. Mostly when it's used more subtly, like here or here. Yes, humor is needed regardless of the genre. My main problem with the way this show handles its jokes isn't that I don't particularly find them funny, but that they are always delivered in moments that completely kill tension."
Ow, 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 ow. You didn't have...
Birdie Boy says, "Murder Drone's very flippant attitude towards genocide was what made me drop the series. Seeing Uzi cry about a boy thinking she's weird, and not the fact that she accidentally murdered half her classmates kind of pissed me off. Both this show and Hazbin seem to have a love for using genocide to push conflict without really acknowledging the harm done to the survivors. Curiously, when I first watched Murder Drones, I too almost dropped it at episode 4. Seeing no one caring that Uzi killed around 10 people, when the previous episode wanted you to be horrified at Doll's actions, really left a sour taste in my mouth. Doll's family is brutally murdered and V and J laugh in her face about it, and somehow she's the only character who dies. And her death is played off as a gag in the finale. This show loves to talk about how traumatized V, J and Anne were, and then barely explores the emotions and feelings of the actual victims without playing it off as a joke. I don't mind genocide or death used for comedy. I do mind, however, when death is taken very seriously in one scene, only for the characters to be indifferent in the next. Just like Hazbin Hotel, I think Murder Drones should have stuck to either being a goofy show or a serious one. Regarding the show exploring J, V and Anne's trauma, it's connected to what I said earlier about Uzi. They are the main cast, therefore only their pain matters. The other slaughtered drones are just oil-filled tin cans whose only function is to die when the plot requires it. Now here's a spicier take. I think this show isn't great at writing women. It's actually a little funny to me how this show has mostly female characters and yet is aggressively heterosexual and male-centered. Anne is just this flawless good boy, where almost every female relationship is centered on him. He has one girl with a crush on him, another girl who cares about him deeply, and even the main antagonist has a brother-sister relationship with him. They're also the only two major female characters the show cares about giving a happy ending. Although I don't think it was done intentionally, I do think Birdie Boy has a point. Out of all the characters, the only one who doesn't have any flaws is Anne. Jay completely forgot about Tessa. V is openly sadistic. Uzi has her temper problems, and Sin committed an actual genocide. Anne is always treated as if he were completely innocent, although he too killed drones. You could say that sometimes his naivety is excessive, but the narrative never treats it as a flaw he has to overcome. As for all female relationships being centered around him, it is true, but to be honest, that is because all the other characters are female. When Uzi was crying about Anne thinking she was weird, it dawned on me that this show is written by a man. How does a teenage girl murder her classmates, and all she cares about is her crush thinking she's weird? I'm glad the show didn't go full love triangle harem, but the male-female relationships barely feel as fleshed out as the male-female ones. As someone who's been a teenage girl, I can assure you that if I had turned into a vampire and killed my classmates, my crush thinking I'm weird would be the least of my problems. And yes, I would have loved to see V and Uzi bond more. I like that small moment in episode 8 when they reunite, but it definitely would have hit harder if they had interacted more. And now for my spiciest take of all. I don't like the designs. They're not bad, but the repetition, even if understandable for lore reasons, kind of makes a lot of the characters not very interesting or effective in terms of scares. I don't think Sin is scary. I think the wide mouth and sharp teeth is about as effective as the repetitive shark teeth designs in Hazbin Hotel. And personally, I'm not a fan of the hair. I can understand it a bit for the robots in hiding, but why do the murder drones also have hair? I feel like they'd be more effective and scary if the show leaned more into the robotic aspects. I think the show kind of has that in the animation issue of having character designed in a way to sell merch. There's no reason for the drones to have curves, hair, and not wear pants, other than to be hot, cute characters for people to buy merch of. While I don't mind the worker drones having hair as they are trying to emulate humans, I think the disassembly drones were a huge missed opportunity for the show to fully lean into the horror aspects. I think it's fine that they had hair when they were still normal drones, but I can't see why Sin would care about that. Humanoid robots with Edward Scissorhands blade who hunt down other robots and drink their oil? That sounds scary and cool, except we got this. Do I hate this design? Well, no, although V and J having curves is a very odd design choice. I just don't think it fits the story Murder Drones wanted to tell. And yes, Sin is not scary. The idea of a robot wearing the skin of a child is disturbing, but I just can't take her seriously with that frog grin on her face and that tongue constantly dangling out. There are some moments here and there where she leans more into her robotic side, and she manages to at least faintly activate that part of my brain tied to the fear factor. But then she goes eager beaver and it all fades again. Also, I lied. I have one more spicy take. While I do think Murder Drones is better than both Hazbin and Helluva, I don't think it's by much. The only major pro Murder Drones has is that it doesn't feel hypocritical. It's very exhausting, bloated, and tonally inconsistent. But it's not dragged down by characters who have done far worse morally ground standing to other characters. I do, however, think if Liam wasn't so offline and was as terminally online as Viv, people wouldn't be as charitable to the show. They have a lot of similarities. But pacing, bloating and confusing lore, questionable female character writing, tonal inconsistency, bad jokes, repetitive design choices, etc. The last part of this comment is very harsh, but I think this critique is understandable. Yes, Murder Drones does share many of the flaws Hazbin has, but I still think they have some positive elements that elevate them. Hazbin has mostly great songs and phenomenal voice acting, while Murder Drones has more likable characters, at least in my opinion. Another point that elevates Murder Drones is the soundtrack. While I think both shows are flawed, at least for now I prefer Murder Drones. As for Liam, I personally am not too familiar with him, so I can't know whether fans would be more charitable to the show or not if he were terminally online. I know Vivzi said and did some questionable stuff, but other than that, I mostly just watch shows. I really don't care about dramas on social media. Belican says, the show needs better writing as season 2, and honestly Anne should be treated way better and be the one to fight and not get sidelined in the show. I think Anne should have been the one with the absolute solver, like what a lot of other reviewers wanted instead of the girl is the key to everything trope. Also, I don't like the Annex Uzi relationship, not because of the controversy, but Annex J or V just seemed way better and dramatic. As for the show needing better writing, I agree, but I don't understand why everyone wants a second season. Potentially unpopular opinion, but I don't want a second season of the show because there really isn't anything to narrate. Humanity is dead. Sin destroyed the other colonies. Anne and Uzi are together, and the Solver isn't a threat anymore. What would season 2 even be about? At best, I'd love a reboot. I disagree on Anne getting more importance in the story because I'm not a fan of his character. I just don't find him that interesting, and his excessive naivety reminds me of someone else. Just like pretty much every ship, I'm neutral to Annex Uzi. As for Annex J, I personally dislike it. J did nothing but abuse Anne, so I wouldn't want him to be in a relationship with her. Annex V sounds slightly better because V cares for Anne, but I'm not a fan of it either. Electro Addiction says, Murder Drones is the definition of being a mile wide yet an inch deep. It has so many story concepts and world building potential to be utilized, especially with an entire frozen planet full of mystery and planet Earth for the lore. And yet a lot of it was wasted. 80% of characters feel like convenient plaything dolls that have the survival instincts of a dead battery, which would have been so cool and interesting if they expanded on it. Maybe the Absolute Solver has the ability to severely mentally handicap anyone without the Solver, so they are easier to either eat or assimilate, and then after Sin is swallowed, the other drones get their senses back. I remember someone under my Murder Drones video explaining that the drones don't care if they are killed because they were programmed not to care, but that sounds idiotic to me. They are drones, but by deciding to build a society after the humans were gone, they had already defied their original programming. If they really don't have any self-preservation, then why do they even bother to have kids? Why bother to build walls to protect themselves from the disassembly drones? And that idea about the Solver incapacitating drones sounds great. The world of Murder Drones feels so small even though it takes place on 2 planets. It's never explained if JC Jensen was even a real company. It wasted a lot of story potential in place of either meta humor or shock value. Like it would have been so cool if Sin didn't kill Tessa, didn't destroy JC Jensen, but instead eternally enslaved them to do her bidding while acting as a company. And it would have made Sin look way smarter than she already was, as well as forcing the humans and the drones to work together to defeat the monster. B also should have stayed dead. Rush's character development, such as Lizzie and B's friendship, the story doesn't take itself seriously 70% of the time, shows terrifying, cool and interesting things in the background, whilst doing absolutely nothing with them. Examples being the Copper 9 cities, the Corpse Spire, or the Sin experiments. Like there were a lot of crazy looking symbols and things done with corpses that were never explained ever, etc. I also think that Sin with Tessa's skin is inferior to both normal Sin and the security camera Sin. My hottest actual take. Okay, I admit that this is just my theory, but I think the reason why Liam, while being a great artist, is a not so good writer, is that he is the type of writer I like to call the hyperfixated. By that I mean he had an idea in his head that he really liked, and wrote a story that revolves around getting to that Sin, regardless of whether the journey to reach it makes sense. If you take a look at Internation Cube, another unfinished project of his, you'll notice a character that is eerily similar to Sin. He really likes the concept of a female robot wearing a child's skin, and wanted his story to reach that point. I admit this is me making assumptions, but if this is what happened, it would explain why the writing is so bad. Liam didn't write Murder Drones with the intention of telling a story. He just liked the concept of robotic vampire drones occasionally wearing children's skin, and didn't really care about the plot. I too really like Sin's butler design. I prefer it over her skin suit look. I may be wrong of many of these since my memory is a bit fuzzy. But my point stands. This show had so many interesting things, whether in the background, implied things, stuff that characters say, etc., that were just sadly forgotten about. Obviously, the creators had limited resources, but the Amazing Digital Circus doesn't have this problem as bad. Murder Drones was really starting to get very good regardless of these issues. But episode 8 was so trash that it actually made the previous 2 episodes, and the entire show, worse. Like at some point I was obsessed with Murder Drones, and now I have a slight intrigue for it. The Amazing Digital Circus didn't have this problem because Gooseworks knew from the start the story she wanted to tell, while Liam clearly didn't. If a season 2 ever comes out, I will watch it, but I understand feeling your interest diminished after episode 8. Vosco the Datrodil says, Doll was the best character by far. At least she was the one who interested me the most. I personally don't like Doll, but to each their own. I think the show would have benefited from not using Uzi's point of view all the time. Seeing Doll's parallel journey would have been cool. Ellie says, the plot is so confusing, and the way it's presented comes off as, you should know this, why don't you? Here's another plot point even though you don't understand the last one. Which might just be me. Everyone I've talked to says they had to watch explaining or theory videos to even grasp what was going on. But then again, that was one of my favorite parts of the show. It definitely made me more interested, but I can't say the same for others. I completely understand the enjoyment of watching theory videos. I'm a FNAF fan, that's pretty much half the fun of it. The problem is that Murder Drones didn't present itself as an enigmatic book, an ARG, or a cryptic video game. It's a TV show, and it can't rely too much on things like pausing the episode to read what a frame says to understand the plot. Once again, I think Gravity Falls pulled this off perfectly. It gave fans tons of material to theorize about, but at the same time, the plot could easily be understood. From what I remember, there's multiple plot points that come suddenly and have no context for way too long, which makes some big moments not hit as hard, if you still don't understand, which I can say definitely happens. Forgive me if this is too long and not valid. I haven't watched the series for a while, and this is what I remember. Yes, the show loves to introduce plot points that haven't been established. If you tell me that you immediately understood what this thing was on your first watch, you're bluffing. Random Theater Kid says, Anne got over V's death way too quickly. Pretty much everyone got over it too quickly. And once again, this happens because the show just can't pause for a moment to let everything breathe. Sonic Return Channel says, I think the other side characters like Thad forgot fucking stayed for no reason by the self-insert Liam, and Lizzie who really should have a character arc or character development or something. I agree on Thad. I think he's a pretty underrated character. He's the only one of Uzi's classmates who doesn't find her weird, and I liked seeing him team up with her and Anne in episode 2. Unfortunately, the show forgot about him after that. As for Lizzie, I disagree. Maybe it's because I can't stand the popular dumb blonde girl trope, but I'm glad she didn't have a major role in the story. I liked seeing Sparky mold her, though. Jay character got horribly written for bringing her back for no reason and making her get no character arc. Jay getting no character arc is still one of the things that bother me the most about this show. They had all the elements to make her rebel against Sin after finding out what she did to Tessa, and they did nothing with them. And the plot points just haven't been explored yet, or places which is just pathetic, and also the runtime for the episodes are just rushed and terrible. Like the finale, it is rushed and have terrible character arc for Jay as a character. Yes, episode 8 felt very rushed. I feel like it could have been at least 3 or 4 episodes. Candy Star says, for my hot takes, it would be, I don't think a story can be seen as good, bad, or well written, or whatever we can qualify it, when the story isn't explicitly presented, but implicitly expects the fans to have theories on the show. I think that even if a story presents itself in a very cryptic way, we can still judge it. And in Murder Drone's case, it had all the cards to win the game, but chose not to use them well. I think if the show is made to be too implicit for someone to be able to understand the story just like that, then the way we see the story is very more alike to come from the imagination of the viewer over the show. That I don't think the show can ever claim to be good if the way we see the story is through someone's interpretation of the story, which comes more from the imagination of the fan over what the story really tells. I think Candy Star is partially correct here. For Murder Drones, I talked with fans who didn't actually like the show. They liked their interpretation of the show, with their headcanons here and there. I don't think it's wrong to enjoy a show like that, but I also think it's weird to claim you're a fan of something if you have to pretty much reimagine the whole thing as your fanfiction. This is also why I wouldn't call myself a Hazbin Hotel fan. I think the show has great songs, and I still say the pilot is great, but the actual show, not so much in my opinion. I did read some reinterpretations that were interesting though. That doesn't make me a Hazbin Hotel fan. At best, I would just be someone who likes an interpretation of the show. Monobro says, Jay is overhated and she's not that bad. She was once a sweet loyal girl who lost her owner mother and is now alone. I wouldn't say that people hate Jay. It's just that they felt disappointed by the way her character was treated. As for her being loyal, she didn't care that her owner got killed and skinned, so I don't think that word is fitting for her. Doll did nothing wrong. I love V, her and Jay are my favorites, but V killed her parents and she's an orphan now. Of course she's fine to be pissed. I don't really have a problem with Doll trying to get revenge on V. As you said, it makes sense. I just think it's weird how she killed plenty of drones and no one cared. V killing her parents doesn't justify her slaughtering innocent drones that had nothing to do with it. Nori's regular design is better than the heart one. I actually think she has one of the best designs, and it's a shame we only saw it once in a flashback scene. N is smart, he's just holding back. I wouldn't say N isn't smart. He's just oblivious and sometimes overtly naive. Pilot Uzi is cringe. New one is my spirit animal though. I think Uzi remained cringe throughout the whole show. And although I understand why some people dislike her attitude, this is probably the only time where I don't mind having a cringe character. Uzi's character arc is about embracing her weird side, and in the end, it helps her defeat the enemy. Sin should have had a trilogy like Bill Cipher. Sin really needed more time to be established as a villain, and having her get defeated in a single episode was a bad choice. Lucario and the Alga says, definitely biased because it's what I centered my fanfic around, but a better direction for the later episodes would have been N and V reconnecting and getting back together slowly in some form. After Uzi magically hacked their brains and their memories returned, there was no reaction or even discussion about that in the show. They could have gone through a whole struggle over multiple episodes of wanting to return to the connection they had before, but acknowledging that it won't be exactly the same, and actually confronting at least some minor crisis of identity now that their past selves are completely remembered or restored, but alongside the memories and knowledge of everything they've done since Sin first altered them into disassembly drones, and wondering who exactly they're meant to be now. Funnily enough, shortly after I published my full series review, I realized how weird it was that both N and V never discussed what they saw in their memories in episode 5, and I would have loved that. The way Uzi's character went came across as a wish fulfillment. An anime weeb high school outcast gets her cool boyfriend, gets superpowers, suffers no consequences for any negative action, saves the world and gets to keep the special powers afterwards, which she then visibly uses to intimidate her classmates for her amusement. I'd have Uzi have her crush on N, but have it not pan out because of the prior paragraph happening, and instead have her and V be friends, and Uzi actually be the one to help them with their previously mentioned new identity conflict, assuring them or convincing them they will be whoever they choose to become, and her simply being friends with them at the end, along with, in my version, no longer having the solver powers. She could learn a lesson, alongside the audience, that while your fantasies won't become reality, there are plenty of endings or paths in reality that are better than any darker place you were before. I agree, and I wish the show ended with that message. I personally wasn't a fan of Uzi keeping the Solver's powers after defeating it. And finally, Polly says, Tessa deserves a better story. I agree, and I will use this comment as an opportunity to rant a little about Tessa. I didn't really talk about her in my review, but honestly, she's my favorite character, and I was extremely disappointed by the lack of emotional response from N, V, and J regarding Tessa being dead. I got the impression they didn't care as much as they should have, considering Tessa was like a surrogate mother to them when they lived in the manor. The show acknowledged Doll's death, but why couldn't we get the same thing for Tessa? I would have loved to see a gravestone with her name in the credits. It feels like her character wasn't given the significance she deserved despite how important she was to the story, and she really could have been more than a presence in a flashback episode and a skin suit for Sin. So in the end, I think the reason why I like Tessa so much is that she encapsulates what Murder Drones is to me, something that could have been great but was killed, preventing it from expressing its true potential. And since we're on the topic, I will end with my personal Murder Drones hot take. The best piece of content tied to Murder Drones isn't from the show itself, it's the Forever music video by AJ Di Spirito. Besides the fact that it's an amazing song, it gives us more Tessa content, and the reveal that Tessa is doomed to never rest due to Sin desecrating her corpse is terrifying. It really put in the horror of what happened to her after the gala, and it would have been so cool to see this in the actual show. I don't care for a season 2, but I'll gladly watch a prequel series that focuses on Tessa and the fall of humanity. So what we got from your unpopular Murder Drones opinions is that Sin isn't scary, Anne and Uzi are a bad couple, and Doll is secretly the best Murder Drones character. As always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.